Acquisition, the initial stage when one links a neutral stimulus and a US so that the neutral stimulus begins triggering the CR, or the strengthening of a reinforced response. Associative learning, learning that certain events occur together. These events may be two stimuli or response in a sequence. Behaviorism, the view that psychology, 1, should be an objective science, that 2, studies behavior without reference to a mental process. Most research psychologists today agree with 1, but not 2. Biofeedback, a system for electronically recording, amplifying, and feeding back information regarding a subtle psychological state. Classical conditioning, a type of learning in which one learns to link two or more stimuli and anticipate events. Cognitive map, a mental representation of a layout of one's environment. Conditioned reinforcer, also called secondary reinforcer, a stimulus that gains its reinforcing power through its associative with a primary reinforcer. Conditioned response, the learned response to a previously neutral but now conditioned stimulus. Conditioned stimulus, an originally irrelevant stimulus that after association with an unconditioned stimulus comes to trigger a conditioned stimulus. Continuous reinforcement, reinforcing the desired response every time it occurs. Discrimination, the ability to distinguish between a conditioned stimulus and a stimuli that do not signal a US. Discriminative stimulus, a stimulus that elicits response after association with reinforcement. Extinction, the diminishing of a CR when a US does not follow a CS, or when response is no longer reinforced. Extrinsic motion, a desire to perform a behavior or receive promised rewards or avoid threatened punishment. Fixed interval schedule, a reinforcement schedule that reinforces the response only by after a specified time has elapsed. Fixed ratio schedule, a reinforcement schedule that reinforces the response only after a specified number of responses. Generalization, the tendency, once a response has been conditioned for stimuli similar to the CS, to elicit similar response. Habitation, in organisms, decreasing response to a stimuli with repeated exposure to it. Higher order conditioning, also called second order conditioning, a procedure in which CS is one conditioning experience is paired with a neutral stimulus, creating a second. Insight, a sudden, often novel realization of a solution to a problem. Intrinsic motivation, a desire to perform a behavior effectively for its own sake. Latent learning, learning that occurs but is not apparent until there is an incentive to demonstrate it. Law of effect, Edward L. Thorndike's principle that behaviors followed by favorable consequences become more likely, that behaviors followed by unfavorable consequences become less likely. Learned helplessness, the helplessness and passive resignation in animal or human learns when unable to avoid repeated adverse events. Learning, a relative permanent change in an organism's behavior due to experience. Mirror neurons, frontal lobe neurons that fire when performing certain actions or when observing others doing so. Modeling, the process of observing and imitating a specific behavior. Negative punishment, withdraw a desired stimulus. Negative reinforcement, increasing behaviors by stopping, reducing negative stimuli. A negative reinforcement is any stimulus that removed response strains the response. Observational learning, also called social learning, learning by observing others. Operant behavior, behavior that operates on the environment producing consequences. Operant chamber, also known as Skinner's box, a chamber containing a bar or key that an animal can manipulate to obtain food or water. Reinforcer. Operant conditioning, a type of learning in which behavior is straightened if followed by a reinforcer or diminished if followed by a punisher. Partial reinforcement, reinforcing a response only part of the time, result in slower acquisition response, but much greater resistance existence that continues to reinforce. Positive punishment, administrator in an adverse response. Positive reinforcement. Increasing behaviors by presenting positive stimuli. A positive reinforcer is any stimulus that, when presented, strengthens a response. Primary reinforcer. Innately reinforcer stimulates pro-social behavior, positive, constructive, helpful behavior, the opposite of an antisocial behavior. Punishment, an event that decreases the behavior that it follows. Reinforcer, any event that strengthens the behavior it follows. Respondent behavior, behavior that occurs as an automatic response to some stimulus. Shaping, a procedure in which reinforcers guide behavior toward closer and closer optimization to a desired behavior. Spontaneous recovery, the reappearance after a pause of an extinguished CR. Unconditional response, the unlearned naturally occurring response to the unconditional stimulus. Unconditioned stimulus, a stimulus that unconditionally, naturally, and automatically triggers a response. Variable interval schedule, a reinforcer schedule that reinforces a response at an unpredictable time intervals. Variable ratio schedule, a reinforcer schedule that reinforces response of an unpredictable number of responses.